May 25, 2005. The Ataturk Olympic Stadium in Istanbul, Turkey. Under the floodlights, on a warm Mediterranean night, something impossible happened. Something that defies logic, that challenges belief, that rewrites what we understand about the limits of human spirit and sporting drama. This is the story of how Liverpool Football Club, dead and buried at halftime, rose from the ashes to claim European football's greatest prize in the most extraordinary circumstances ever witnessed. This is the story of the miracle of Istanbul. 3 goals down, no hope, no chance. The greatest club side assembled in a generation running rampant. 52 minutes on the clock, and the Champions League trophy already has AC Milan's name engraved on it. Except football, as we're about to discover, doesn't care about logic. Football doesn't read the script. And on this night, in this stadium, football is about to produce its most breathtaking plot twist. What you're about to hear isn't just about a football match. It's about belief when belief seems foolish. It's about courage when courage seems futile. It's about a moment when ordinary men became immortal, when the impossible became reality, when history was written by the most unlikely of authors. This is Istanbul, this is 2005, and this is what really happened on Liverpool's miracle night. To understand the miracle, we must first understand the journey. Liverpool Football Club, founded in 1892, 5-time European champions, had fallen on harder times by the turn of the millennium. The glory years of the 1970s and 80s, when Bob Paisley and Joe Fagan made Anfield Fortress Europe, seemed like ancient history. The dynasty had crumbled, the dominance had faded, and by 2004, Liverpool hadn't won their own domestic league in 14 years. They were a giant, certainly, but a sleeping giant. A club living on memories and history rather than creating new chapters of glory. Enter Rafael Benitez. The Spaniard arrived at Anfield in the summer of 2004 from Valencia, where he'd built a reputation as a tactical mastermind. He'd broken the Barcelona-Real Madrid duopoly in La Liga, winning 2 championships and the UEFA Cup. He was meticulous, analytical, obsessed with detail. Some called him cold, some called him calculating, but everyone acknowledged his tactical brilliance. Liverpool needed someone who could rebuild, who could restore pride, who could navigate the tactical complexity of modern European football. Benitez seemed the perfect fit. The 2004 to 2005 season started modestly for Liverpool in the Champions League. They were placed in Group A alongside Monaco, who'd reached the previous year's final, Deportivo La Coruña, and Olympiacos. Nothing glamorous, but certainly challenging. The opening match saw Liverpool face Monaco at Anfield, and they started well with a 2-0 victory. However, reality checked them quickly in the return fixture away to Olympiacos, where they lost 1-0. It was a wake-up call. European football at this level demands perfection, and Liverpool had shown they could be vulnerable on the road. Liverpool then travelled to face Deportivo and secured a hard-fought 1-0 away victory. A 0-0 draw at home to Deportivo in the return fixture was followed by a 1-0 defeat away to Monaco at the Stade Louis II. Liverpool's Champions League campaign was now hanging by a thread. Everything came down to the final group match at home to Olympiacos. The mathematics were simple but daunting. Liverpool needed to win by 2 clear goals to progress. Anything less, and their European adventure would end before Christmas. The pressure was immense. The stadium was electric, and on a cold December night, Liverpool produced one of those special Anfield evenings. The match against Olympiacos has passed into Liverpool folklore, not just for the result, but for one moment of pure magic. Rivaldo gave the Greek champions the lead, and suddenly Liverpool needed 3 goals to go through. Florent Cinema Pongole pulled one back. Then Neil Mellor, on as a substitute, scored to make it 2-1. But Liverpool still needed another. The clock was ticking toward 90 minutes. Anfield was roaring, urging their team forward, sensing something special might be possible. Then, in the 86th minute, Mellor's flick sent Steven Gerrard running toward the edge of the penalty area. The captain, Liverpool's talismanic midfielder, a local boy who embodied everything the club represented, struck the ball with his right foot. It was one of those strikes that seems to gather power as it flies through the air. It screamed past Antonios Nicopolidis in the Olympiacos goal, hit the back of the net, and sent Anfield into delirium. 3-1. Liverpool were through. The commentary became iconic. "Oh, you beauty! What a hit, son! What a hit!" It was a goal that would define a season. It was a goal that announced Liverpool were back. It was a goal that began the road to Istanbul. The round of 16 draw paired Liverpool with Bayer Leverkusen, the German side that had reached the Champions League final in 2002 and the UEFA Cup final in 2003. They were experienced, talented, and dangerous. But Liverpool, now gathering momentum, were confident. The first leg at Anfield finished 3-1 to Liverpool, with Luis Garcia scoring twice and Steven Gerrard adding another. The return leg in Germany was tense but controlled. A 3-1 defeat on the night meant Liverpool progressed 4-4 on aggregate thanks to away goals. They were through to the quarterfinals. The quarterfinal draw seemed to doom Liverpool's European adventure. Juventus, the Italian giants, one of Europe's most successful clubs, a team that contained Pavel Nedved, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, Alessandro Del Piero, and Fabio Cannavaro, a team that seemed to have everything Liverpool lacked: experience at the highest level, world-class players in every position, and the tactical sophistication that Italian football demanded. Liverpool travelled to Turin for the first leg as massive underdogs. Few gave them any chance. Juventus were overwhelming favourites. What happened in Turin that night shocked European football. Liverpool defended with discipline, attacked with purpose, and scored through Sami Hyypiä and Luis Garcia to win 2-1. The Stadio delle Alpi was stunned into silence. Liverpool had gone to one of Europe's most intimidating venues and won. Juventus, shell-shocked, knew they now faced a monumental task at Anfield. The return leg was a tactical masterclass from Benitez. Liverpool contained Juventus, frustrated their attacking stars, and held on for a 0-0 draw. They were through to the semi-finals. Against all odds, Liverpool had eliminated one of the tournament favourites. The semi-final draw brought another fascinating matchup. Chelsea, the English champions, managed by Jose Mourinho, the self-proclaimed special one, bankrolled by Roman Abramovich's billions. A team that had ended Arsenal's Invincibles run, that had won the League Cup, that were on course to win their first league title in 50 years. A team containing Frank Lampard, John Terry, Didier Drogba, and Arjen Robben. A team that seemed unstoppable. The rivalry between Liverpool and Chelsea had intensified in recent years, and this semi-final would be decided over 2 legs of intense, brutal, uncompromising football. The first leg at Stamford Bridge was a cagey affair. Chelsea dominated possession but couldn't break down Liverpool's disciplined defence. Benitez had done his homework. He knew Chelsea's patterns, their movements, their strengths and weaknesses. The match finished 0-0, a result that heavily favoured Chelsea given the second leg would be at Anfield and away goals would count double. Chelsea were confident, Mourinho was confident, but Liverpool had something Chelsea couldn't quantify: the European pedigree, the experience of performing on the biggest stage, and the memory of past glories. The second leg at Anfield on May 3, 2005, produced one of the most controversial goals in Champions League history. Early in the match, Milan Baros chased a ball toward the Chelsea goal. William Gallas challenged him, and the ball ran toward goalkeeper Petr Cech. Luis Garcia, Liverpool's diminutive Spanish forward, raced in and poked the ball toward goal. Cech seemed to save it. Gallas seemed to clear it, but the linesman flagged for a goal. Had the ball crossed the line? Television replays were inconclusive. Some angles suggested yes, others suggested no. Chelsea were furious. Mourinho was incandescent, but the goal stood. Liverpool defended for their lives. Chelsea threw everything at them. Wave after wave of blue shirts attacked the Liverpool goal. Jamie Carragher, Liverpool's warrior defender, made block after block. Jerzy Dudek, the Polish goalkeeper, made save after save. The tension was unbearable. The pressure was relentless. But Liverpool held firm. When the final whistle blew, Anfield erupted. Liverpool were through to the Champions League final. Against all expectations, against superior resources, against the champions of England, Liverpool had prevailed. They were going to Istanbul. The celebrations were wild but tempered by realism. Liverpool's domestic form had been inconsistent all season. They would finish 5th in the Premier League, missing out on automatic Champions League qualification for the following season. They were underdogs who'd exceeded all expectations, but now they faced their biggest challenge yet. In the final, waiting for them in Istanbul, were AC Milan, the Italian giants, the most successful Italian club in European competition, a team that hadn't just qualified for the final but had done so in imperious fashion, destroying every opponent they'd faced, a team that many considered the best club side in the world. If Liverpool's journey to Istanbul was characterized by grit, determination, and the ability to exceed expectations, AC Milan's path was one of pure, unadulterated dominance. This was a team assembled at enormous expense, managed by Carlo Ancelotti, one of Europe's most sophisticated tactical minds, and containing players who represented the absolute peak of world football. This wasn't just a good team, this was a great team. Some argued it was the greatest club team of the modern era. Start with the defense. Dida in goal, a Brazilian international with lightning reflexes and commanding presence. In front of him, a back four that read like a who's who of defensive excellence. Paolo Maldini, the captain, the legend, playing in his 8th European Cup final, a man who'd won the competition 4 times already, a man who'd spent his entire career at Milan, who embodied everything the club represented. At 40 years old, he was still operating at the highest level, reading the game better than anyone, leading by example, the ultimate professional. Next to Maldini, Alessandro Nesta, arguably the best pure defender in world football. Elegant, intelligent, technically superb, Nesta could defend anything. He anticipated danger before it developed. He positioned himself perfectly. He rarely needed to make last-ditch tackles because he was already in the right place. Then Jaap Stam, the Dutch international who'd won the Champions League with Manchester United in 1999, a physical monster, aggressive, dominant in the air, frightening in the tackle. And Cafu, the Brazilian right-back, a World Cup winner, a player with more international caps than anyone in Brazilian history, bombing forward at every opportunity, providing width and creativity. That back four, protected by Dida, represented defensive perfection. They had everything: experience, intelligence, physicality, technical quality. Liverpool's attack, respectable but not world-class, would face the sternest possible test. In midfield, Milan were equally formidable. Gennaro Gattuso, the pitbull, all snarling aggression and tireless running. He'd win the ball, he'd break up play, he'd get in opponents' faces. Next to him, Andrea Pirlo, the deep-lying playmaker, the architect, the man who conducted Milan's attacks with precision and vision. Pirlo could dictate tempo with a single pass. He saw passes others couldn't imagine. He controlled matches from his deep position, spraying balls left and right, speeding up play, slowing it down, always in control. On the wings, Kaká and Clarence Seedorf. Kaká, the Brazilian genius, 23 years old and playing the best football of his life. Fast, skillful, powerful, with an eye for goal. He'd scored 10 goals in Milan's Champions League campaign, terrorizing defenses across Europe. Seedorf, the Dutch international, another player with multiple Champions League medals, powerful and creative, able to beat players or provide assists. Between them, they could unlock any defense. And up front, Andriy Shevchenko and Hernan Crespo. Shevchenko, the Ukrainian striker, Milan's talisman, the 2004 Ballon d'Or winner as European Footballer of the Year. Clinical, deadly, one of the most feared strikers in world football. Crespo, the Argentine, on loan from Chelsea, another world-class forward with the movement, touch and finishing that made him virtually unstoppable. Two genuine world-class strikers in the same team. It was an embarrassment of riches. Milan's journey to Istanbul had been a procession. They'd topped their group comfortably, ahead of Barcelona, Shakhtar Donetsk, and Celtic. In the knockout stages, they'd demolished Manchester United 2-0 on aggregate in the round of 16, with Crespo scoring both goals at Old Trafford to humiliate Sir Alex Ferguson's side. In the quarter-finals, they'd beaten Internazionale, their city rivals, in a Milan derby that saw them win 5-0 on aggregate. In the semi-finals, they'd cruised past PSV Eindhoven, winning 3-1 on aggregate. At every stage, Milan had been comfortable, dominant, superior. The bookmakers made Milan overwhelming favourites for the final. Some odds were as short as 1-3 for a Milan victory. Liverpool were rank outsiders, with some bookmakers offering 7-1 against them lifting the trophy. The media coverage reflected this disparity. Milan were feted as potential champions before a ball had been kicked. Liverpool were praised for reaching the final, but given little chance of actually winning it. The narrative was clear. Milan would win, Liverpool would be honoured runners-up, and Carlo Ancelotti would lead his team to glory. Ancelotti himself was relaxed and confident in the build-up. He'd managed Milan since 2001 and had already won the Champions League in 2003, defeating Juventus in the all-Italian final in Manchester. He knew how to win this competition. He knew how to prepare his team for the biggest stage. He spoke respectfully about Liverpool, but couldn't hide his belief that Milan were the better team. Most objective observers agreed with him. The tactical analysis before the match focused on Milan's strengths and how they'd exploit Liverpool's weaknesses. Pirlo's passing against Liverpool's midfield, Kaká's pace against Liverpool's aging defence, Shevchenko's finishing against Jerzy Dudek. Every matchup seemed to favour Milan. Liverpool's best hope, most analysts suggested, was to keep the score respectable and not be embarrassed. Nobody, absolutely nobody, predicted what was about to unfold. Istanbul in May 2005 was a city gripped by football fever. The Ataturk Olympic Stadium, located on the outskirts of the city, had been chosen to host the Champions League final, UEFA's showcase event, the most watched club football match on the planet. Fans from Liverpool and Milan began arriving days before the match, transforming Istanbul into a carnival of red and white from Liverpool and red and black from Milan. Liverpool's supporters, famous throughout Europe for their passion and loyalty, descended on Istanbul in numbers that exceeded all expectations. Officially, Liverpool had been allocated 25,000 tickets, but estimates suggest 40,000 Liverpool fans made the journey to Turkey. Some had tickets, many didn't. They came because this was Liverpool in a European Cup final, something they'd waited 20 years to see. They came because this was what supporting Liverpool meant, traveling across continents to support their team on the biggest night. They came because they believed in miracles. The Liverpool fans brought their famous songs and their unbreakable spirit. Taksim Square in central Istanbul became a sea of red. Liverpool supporters sang "You'll Never Walk Alone," the club's anthem, at full volume. They sang songs about their heroes, about Gerrard and Carragher, about their history and their hopes. Turkish locals were charmed by their enthusiasm and their passion. There was no trouble, no violence, just pure football joy. The Liverpool supporters, win or lose, were determined to enjoy their moment. Milan's supporters, though fewer in number, brought their own style. The Ultras, Milan's hardcore support, draped the city in red and black banners. They sang their songs, waved their flags, and exuded confidence. Milan fans had seen their team win this trophy 5 times before. Based on the atmosphere at the time, they appeared to expect a 6th. This wasn't mere hope, This was expectation based on the quality of their team. They were relaxed, confident, and the celebrations seemed to already be planned. The stadium itself was impressive but flawed. Built in 2002, it could hold 76,000 spectators, but its location, several miles from central Istanbul, made access difficult. The infrastructure wasn't designed for such a massive influx of people. Fans reported long journeys to reach the stadium, chaotic transport, limited facilities. But none of this dampened enthusiasm. This was a Champions League final. These were temporary inconveniences in the face of football history being written. Inside the Liverpool dressing room before the match, Rafael Benitez was calm and methodical. He'd prepared his tactical plan meticulously. Liverpool would play 4-4-2 with Steven Gerrard and Xabi Alonso in central midfield, Harry Kewell and Luis Garcia on the wings, and Milan Barros partnering Djibril Cissé up front. The defense would be Jimmy Traoré, Sami Hyypiä, Jamie Carragher, and Steve Finnan in front of goalkeeper Jerzy Dudek. It was Liverpool's strongest available lineup, though injuries had robbed them of some options. According to various accounts, Benitez's team talk emphasized discipline and belief. Milan were favourites, yes, but finals were unpredictable. Liverpool needed to start well, to not concede early, to stay in the game and frustrate Milan. If they could take the match to half-time level, anything was possible. Gerrard, the captain, reportedly echoed these sentiments, telling his teammates this was their moment, their chance at immortality. They'd come this far, they had nothing to lose. They should play without fear. In the Milan dressing room, Carlo Ancelotti was equally calm, but by most accounts more confident. Based on later interviews, his team talk was reportedly simple. Play your game, be patient, the quality will shine through. Milan had prepared thoroughly. They knew Liverpool's strengths and weaknesses. They knew Gerrard was the key player to stop. They knew Liverpool would be physical and direct. Ancelotti trusted his players' quality to prevail. This was, after all, what they'd been built for. The match officials completed their pre-match briefing. The referee was Manuel Mejuto Gonzalez from Spain, an experienced official who'd handled big matches before. He knew the game would be intense, passionate, possibly volatile. He emphasized the need for early control, for strong but fair officiating. The assistants and fourth official nodded their understanding. This was the biggest match of their careers too. As kickoff approached, the stadium filled to capacity. The Liverpool supporters massed at one end, created a wall of red. The Milan supporters at the opposite end responded with their red and black displays. The neutral sections were filled with corporate guests and football dignitaries, many of whom had paid enormous sums for tickets. UEFA officials, including President Lennart Johansson, took their seats. Television cameras from around the world focused on the pitch. The players emerged from the tunnel to a wall of noise. The Champions League anthem, Handel's Zadok the Priest, as reimagined by UEFA, boomed through the stadium speakers. This piece of music, with its soaring strings and dramatic crescendo, had become synonymous with European football at its highest level. As it played, both sets of players stood in line, some singing along, others standing in silent contemplation. The magnitude of the occasion was written on every face. Steven Gerrard, Liverpool's captain, 25 years old, a local boy who'd risen through the ranks to lead his boyhood club on the biggest stage, looked around the stadium. This was what he'd dreamed of as a child. This was why he'd stayed at Liverpool despite interest from bigger, richer clubs. This was his moment. Next to him, Paolo Maldini, Milan's captain, twice Gerrard's age, was appearing in his 8th European Cup final. He'd seen it all, won it all, but even he seemed moved by the occasion. The television commentators around the world set the scene for their viewers. In England, ITV's Clive Tildersley and his co-commentator prepared to call the biggest match of the club season. In Italy, Spain, Germany, Brazil, the United States, and dozens of other countries, commentators prepared their notes, checked their statistics, and readied themselves to describe what everyone expected to be a Milan victory. None of them knew they were about to witness the most dramatic football match in history. The coin toss was completed. The warm-up finished. The players took their positions. 69,000 people in the stadium and hundreds of millions watching worldwide held their breath. The referee checked his watch, looked at his assistants, and blew his whistle. The 2005 Champions League final had begun. History was about to be made, though not in the way anyone expected. From the very first whistle, AC Milan asserted their authority. They moved the ball with the confidence of a team that knew it was superior. Andrea Pirlo dropped deep to collect possession from the defense. He sprayed passes left and right, switching play, moving Liverpool's midfield around, creating space. Kaka drifted into pockets between Liverpool's defense and midfield, looking dangerous every time he touched the ball. Milan were in complete control. Liverpool, perhaps overwhelmed by the occasion, couldn't get near the ball. Their pressing, usually so effective, was a step too slow. Milan's players moved into space before Liverpool could close them down. Gennaro Gattuso and Clarence Seedorf combined with Pirlo to dominate the midfield battle. Steven Gerrard and Xabi Alonso, Liverpool's two best midfielders, were being outplayed. Harry Kewell, who'd only recently returned from injury, looked uncomfortable. Something was wrong with Liverpool's game plan from the very start. Then, in approximately the 50th second of the match, less than a minute after kickoff, disaster struck. Milan won a free kick on the left side, just inside Liverpool's half. Pirlo stood over it, the master craftsman ready to deliver. He clipped the ball toward the back post, where Paolo Maldini, the veteran captain, had made a late run. The ball bounced once, sitting up perfectly for Maldini. He struck it first time with his left foot, a sweet volley that flew past Jerzy Dudek into the Liverpool goal. 1-0 to Milan, approximately 50 seconds played. The fastest goal in Champions League final history. Paolo Maldini, in his 8th final, had scored. The AC Milan supporters erupted in celebration. The Liverpool fans, stunned into momentary silence, could only watch in horror. This was the nightmare start. This was everything Benitez had warned against. Liverpool hadn't touched the ball more than 3 times, and they were already losing. Maldini ran toward the corner flag, his arms outstretched, his face a mixture of joy and relief. At 40 years old, he was still performing at the highest level, still scoring in Champions League finals. His teammates mobbed him. On the touchline, Carlo Ancelotti allowed himself a small smile. Everything was going to plan. On the Liverpool bench, Rafael Benitez's expression didn't change. His analytical mind was already processing what needed to change, what adjustments could be made. But one thing was clear: Liverpool were in serious trouble. The goal settled Milan and unsettled Liverpool further. The Italian side continued to dominate possession, patiently probing for openings. Liverpool tried to respond, but their passing was sloppy, their movement disjointed. Harry Kewell, clearly not fully fit, was struggling badly. After 18 minutes, he collapsed with a pulled groin muscle. He couldn't continue. Benitez was forced to make his first substitution, bringing on Vladimir Smicer, the Czech midfielder, who'd been at Liverpool since 1999 but had struggled with injuries in recent years. The substitution didn't improve Liverpool's performance. Milan continued to control the match. Kaká was beginning to terrorize Liverpool's defense with his pace and movement. Hernan Crespo and Andriy Shevchenko were both finding space. Liverpool's back four, marshaled by Jamie Carragher and Sami Hyypiä, were being pulled apart. The midfield couldn't get close enough to Milan's playmakers to stop the supply. It was becoming a rout. In the 39th minute, Milan struck again. Kaká received the ball in midfield, turned, and saw space ahead of him. Liverpool's defense backed off, scared of his pace. Kaká drove forward, 30 yards, 40 yards, drawing Liverpool's defense toward him like a magnet. Just as it seemed he'd shoot, he slipped a perfectly weighted pass through to Andriy Shevchenko on the right side of the penalty area. The Ukrainian striker, one of the deadliest finishers in world football, seemed certain to score. He shaped to shoot, but Jerzy Dudek, Liverpool's goalkeeper, made a brave block. The ball bounced clear, but only as far as Hernan Crespo. The Argentine striker, unmarked at the edge of the penalty area, controlled the ball calmly and then lobbed it over Dudek with sublime technique. The ball sailed through the air, arcing beautifully, before dropping into the net. 2-0 to Milan. Crespo turned away in celebration, kissing his badge, pointing to the sky. On the touchline, Carlo Ancelotti applauded. Everything was going perfectly. For Liverpool, the nightmare was deepening. 2-0 down in a Champions League final against a team that looked unbeatable. The Liverpool supporters, to their eternal credit, continued to sing "You'll Never Walk Alone," but their voices betrayed anxiety. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Liverpool were being outclassed, outplayed, embarrassed on the biggest stage. Steven Gerrard, the captain, tried to rally his teammates, but you could see the desperation in his eyes. They needed something, anything, to change the momentum before halftime. It didn't come. Instead, worse followed. In the 44th minute, 1 minute before the halftime break, Milan attacked again. This time, Kaká received the ball in a central position, 35 yards from goal. He looked up, assessed his options, and then played a pass of pure genius. The ball was lofted forward with perfect weight and trajectory, bypassing Liverpool's defense completely, finding Hernan Crespo making a diagonal run across the penalty area. The Argentine didn't break stride. As the ball dropped over his shoulder, he volleyed it first time with his right foot. The technique was exquisite. The execution was perfect. The ball flew past Dudek and into the far corner of the net. 3-0 to Milan. Hernan Crespo had scored his second goal of the half. Liverpool were being destroyed. The Milan supporters were in ecstasy. This was total domination. This was a masterclass. The Champions League trophy was already theirs. Some Milan players, waiting for the halftime whistle, were already celebrating. Paolo Maldini could taste his 6th European Cup. Carlo Ancelotti was already planning his winner's speech. The halftime whistle blew moments later, ending Liverpool's torment temporarily. The players trudged toward the tunnel. The Liverpool players' body language told the story. Heads down, shoulders slumped, totally defeated. Steven Gerrard looked close to tears. Jamie Carragher stared at the ground. Xabi Alonso shook his head in disbelief. They'd been annihilated. They'd been humiliated. They'd been made to look like amateurs against professionals. The dream was over. The fairy tale had become a nightmare. In the stands, Liverpool supporters faced a terrible decision. Some were already leaving, unable to watch any more humiliation. Others stayed, singing defiantly, refusing to abandon their team even in the face of certain defeat. "You'll never walk alone," echoed around the stadium, but the words felt hollow now. How could Liverpool possibly come back from 3-0 down against the best team in Europe? It was impossible. It was over. The second half would be a formality, a prolonged death march to inevitable defeat. In the Milan section, the party had already started. Flags waved, songs were sung, champagne was opened. Milan fans called their families back in Italy to share the good news. Some calculated how quickly they could get to the after-party. This was done. This was over. Milan were champions. All that remained was the second-half coronation and the trophy presentation. Football, it seemed, had delivered exactly what was expected. The best team had won. Order had been restored. Logic had prevailed. Except football doesn't care about logic. Football, as Liverpool and their supporters were about to discover, can produce miracles. In that Liverpool dressing room, during those 15 minutes of halftime, something changed, something shifted, something impossible began to seem possible. And when those Liverpool players emerged for the second half, they carried with them a belief that defied all reason, all logic, all probability. They were about to produce the most astonishing 45 minutes in football history. What happened in the Liverpool dressing room during that 15-minute halftime break has been described, analyzed, and mythologized countless times since. The players who were there have been asked about it in hundreds of interviews. Rafael Benitez has explained his thought process. But even now, 20 years later, there remains something almost mystical about those 15 minutes. Something that transforms this from just a football story into a story about human nature, about belief, about refusing to accept defeat. When the Liverpool players first entered the dressing room, accounts suggest silence dominated. Based on what the players have said in subsequent interviews, nobody wanted to speak, nobody wanted to make eye contact. The humiliation was too raw, too painful. Some players sat with their heads in their hands, others stared blankly at the floor. The dream of winning the Champions League, the goal they'd worked toward all season, had been destroyed in 45 minutes. It appeared that all that remained was surviving the second half without further embarrassment. Steven Gerrard, the captain, was the first to speak according to later accounts. His voice was thick with emotion, close to breaking. He told his teammates they couldn't give up. They owed it to the supporters who'd traveled to Istanbul. They owed it to Liverpool Football Club. They owed it to themselves. Even if they couldn't win, they had to fight, had to show pride, had to give everything in the second half. His words, as he later recalled, were heartfelt and desperate. But at 3-0 down, what realistic hope could there be? Jamie Carragher, Liverpool's vice-captain and warrior defender, echoed Gerrard's sentiments. Carragher, a Scouser like Gerrard, had Liverpool in his blood. He spoke about the club's history, about the great European nights, about never giving up. He reminded his teammates that they wore the Liverpool shirt, that they represented something bigger than themselves. His passion was undeniable, though given the scoreline, even Carragher likely understood the enormity of the challenge ahead. Then Rafael Benitez spoke. The Spanish manager, usually so cool and analytical, addressed his team with clarity and purpose. He didn't scream or shout. He didn't try to inspire through emotion. Instead, he focused on tactics, on practical changes that could improve their performance. His approach was almost scientific, breaking down what had gone wrong and how it could be fixed. Some of the players, emotionally devastated, found this clinical approach almost offensive, but Benitez knew what he was doing. He was giving them something concrete to focus on, something actionable rather than emotional. Benitez's primary tactical change was to shift from 4-4-2 to 3-5-2. Sami Hyypiä, John Arne Riis, and Jamie Carragher would form a back three. Steve Finnan would push forward to become a right wing-back. Steven Gerrard would move forward from central midfield to play just behind the two strikers, essentially becoming an attacking midfielder or second striker. The theory was simple. Liverpool needed more bodies in midfield to combat Milan's dominance in that area. They also needed to get Gerrard closer to goal, where his energy and goal threat could be maximized. But Benitez also made a more radical change. He brought on Didi Hamann, the German defensive midfielder, to replace right-back Steve Finnan. Hamann, at 31 years old, was playing through injury. His toe was broken, a fact he'd hidden from the medical staff. But Benitez needed his experience, his positioning, his ability to shield the defense. Hamann's introduction would prove to be one of the most important tactical substitutions in football history. With the tactical instructions delivered, Benitez addressed the team one final time. He told them to forget the first half. It was history. The second half was a new game. They should play in 15-minute segments. First, don't concede in the next 15 minutes. Then try to score one goal, then reassess. Break the impossible task into manageable chunks. Don't think about winning the game. Think about the next 15 minutes. Focus on that. Control what you can control. The players absorbed these instructions. The tactical changes made sense. But more importantly, Benitez's calm demeanor gave them something to cling to. If the manager hadn't given up, if he still believed changes could make a difference, then maybe they shouldn't give up either. The seed of belief, tiny and fragile, began to grow in that dressing room. It wasn't confidence. confidence. It wasn't even real hope, it was just the smallest possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could make the second half respectable. Outside the dressing room, in the bowels of the Ataturk Stadium, Liverpool supporters were gathering their courage for the second half. Many had tears in their eyes. Some had given up hope entirely and were planning to leave early to beat the traffic. But most, exhibiting the loyalty and defiance that Liverpool fans are famous for, decided to stay. They would support their team to the end, win, lose, or draw. They would sing "You'll Never Walk Alone" with pride even in defeat, because that's what Liverpool supporters do. In the Milan dressing room, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. According to later accounts, Carlo Ancelotti's team talk was relaxed, almost celebratory. He reportedly told his players they'd been magnificent in the first half. They'd executed the game plan perfectly. The second half was now about management, about seeing out the victory professionally. He warned against complacency but couldn't hide his confidence. The trophy appeared to be theirs. Just 45 more minutes of sensible, controlled football. Paolo Maldini reportedly spoke briefly to his teammates. The veteran captain had been here before, many times. Based on what players have said about his leadership, he likely emphasized that a 3-goal lead could be defended, urging his teammates to stay focused, to not do anything careless, to play as they had in the first half. If they maintained their shape and discipline, Liverpool couldn't hurt them. It was simple, it was logical, it made perfect sense. As both teams prepared to return to the pitch, the officials were also gathering themselves for the second half. Referee Manuel Majuto Gonzalez reviewed his first half performance with his assistants. He'd had a quiet game so far, with few controversial decisions. He expected the second half to be more of the same, with Milan controlling possession and Liverpool chasing shadows. He had no reason to expect what was about to unfold. The television commentators filled time during halftime with analysis of Milan's dominance. Experts praised Ancelotti's tactics, Kaká's brilliance, Crespo's finishing. Liverpool's performance was dissected with a mixture of sympathy and criticism. How had they been so poor? Why had Benitez's tactics failed so badly? What could they possibly do differently in the second half? Most pundits concluded that Liverpool should focus on damage limitation, on ensuring they didn't lose by an even more embarrassing margin. In the ITV studio in England, the panel discussed whether Liverpool should make wholesale changes for the second half. Some suggested taking off Steven Gerrard to protect him from further humiliation. Others argued Liverpool should simply try to keep the score respectable. Nobody, and this cannot be emphasized enough, nobody suggested Liverpool could actually win this match. The idea was so absurd it wasn't even discussed. Liverpool were dead and buried. The miracle of Istanbul hadn't even been conceived of yet. The players emerged from the tunnel for the second half. The Milan players looked relaxed, loose, ready to complete their victory parade. The Liverpool players looked different, not confident certainly, but more focused than they had in the first half. Steven Gerrard walked onto the pitch with his jaw set, his eyes fierce. Jamie Carragher was talking constantly to his defensive teammates, organizing, cajoling. Didi Hamann, the surprise halftime substitute, settled into his position in front of the defense, ready to do the dirty work. The Liverpool supporters, seeing their team re-emerge, raised the volume. "You'll never walk alone" rang out again, louder than before. This was defiance in the face of defeat. This was loyalty beyond reason. This was why Liverpool's support is considered among the best in world football. They weren't singing because they expected victory. They were singing because it was the right thing to do, because their team needed them, because that's what being a Liverpool supporter means. The referee checked his watch. The second half kickoff was seconds away. 69,000 people in the stadium waited to see how the final 45 minutes would unfold. Most expected Milan to add to their lead, to turn victory into a rout. Some hoped Liverpool might restore some pride with a consolation goal. Nobody, absolutely nobody, predicted that they were about to witness the most extraordinary sporting comeback in history. Nobody knew that the impossible was about to become reality. Nobody understood that they were present at a moment that would be remembered, discussed, and marveled at for generations to come. The referee blew his whistle. The second half began, and within 6 minutes, everything we thought we knew about football, about sport, about the limits of human achievement, was about to be rewritten. The second half began, and immediately Liverpool looked different. The tactical changes had given them new shape. Didi Hamann sat in front of the defense, plugging the gaps that Kaká had exploited so ruthlessly in the first half. Steven Gerrard pushed higher, closer to Milan's goal, where his energy and power could be more effective. The team seemed more compact, more organized, more dangerous. 54 minutes. Liverpool won a corner on the right side. John Arne Riise prepared to take it. The Norwegian left-back swung the ball into the Milan penalty area. Bodies jostled for position. Paolo Maldini tried to organize his defense. The ball came in high toward the back post. And there, rising above Alessandro Nesta, was Steven Gerrard. Liverpool's captain met the ball with his forehead, powering it downward. The ball bounced in front of Dida and into the net. Goal, 3-1. Gerrard wheeled away in celebration, his face a mixture of joy, defiance, and desperation. He sprinted toward the Liverpool supporters, pumping his fists, screaming. His teammates chased him, jumping on him, sharing the moment. In the stands, Liverpool fans erupted. It wasn't hope yet, not really, but it was something. It was a goal. It was proof they were still alive. It was a tiny spark in the darkness. On the Milan bench, Carlo Ancelotti stood up, concern crossing his face for the first time. It was just one goal. Milan was still 2 goals ahead, but something about Liverpool's celebration, about the energy now emanating from the red-shirted players, suggested danger. Ancelotti called to his players, urging calm, demanding they regain control. From the body language visible on the pitch, Milan's players weren't quite as comfortable anymore. Liverpool, energized by Gerrard's goal, immediately pushed forward again. 56 minutes. Vladimir Smicer, the Czech midfielder who'd replaced Harry Kewell in the first half, received the ball 30 yards from goal. He looked up, saw space ahead of him, and decided to shoot. It was ambitious. The angle was tight. Dida was well positioned, but Smicer struck the ball cleanly with his right foot. It flew toward goal, dipping and swerving. Dida, perhaps unsighted, perhaps caught off guard, reacted late. The ball flew past his outstretched hand and into the far corner of the net. Goal, 3-2. The stadium erupted. Liverpool had scored twice in 2 minutes. The impossible was becoming possible. Smicer ran toward the corner flag, his face a picture of disbelief and joy. His teammates mobbed him. On the touchline, Rafael Benitez allowed himself the smallest of smiles. The gap was closing. On the Milan bench, panic was setting in. Ancelotti was shouting instructions, demanding his team wake up, restore order, regain control. But Milan looked rattled, uncertain, vulnerable for the first time all night. In the stands, Liverpool supporters could hardly believe what they were witnessing. Moments ago, the game had been over. Now, suddenly, improbably, it was 3-2. They were 1 goal away from level. The noise from the Liverpool end was deafening. "You'll never walk alone," rang out with renewed vigor. This wasn't loyalty in defeat anymore. This was belief. This was hope. This was the impossible becoming real. 60 minutes. Liverpool won a free kick on the edge of Milan's penalty area. Xabi Alonso stood over it, considering his options. But instead of taking the free kick himself, he touched it short to Steven Gerrard. The captain struck the ball goalward. It was heading toward the top corner, a certain goal, but Dida flew across his goal and tipped it over for a corner. Brilliant goalkeeping, but only a temporary reprieve. Liverpool's pressure was relentless now. They were playing with an intensity that Milan couldn't match. The tactical changes had worked. Didi Hamann was controlling the midfield, breaking up Milan attacks before they could develop. Steven Gerrard was everywhere, tackling, passing, shooting, leading by example. Jamie Carragher and Sami Hyypiä were throwing their bodies in front of everything. Liverpool had been transformed from a defeated team into warriors. 59 minutes. Liverpool won a penalty. Steven Gerrard had driven into the Milan penalty area when he was brought down by Gennaro Gattuso. The referee pointed to the spot. This was Liverpool's chance to complete the comeback. Xabi Alonso, the Spanish midfielder, stepped up to take it. Remarkably, this would be his first ever professional penalty. He'd never taken one before in his career. The pressure was immense. Alonso struck the penalty with his right foot, aiming low. Dida guessed correctly and saved it, pushing the ball away. But Alonso didn't give up. He followed up his own penalty kick and struck the rebound. The ball flew into the roof of the net. Goal, 3-3. Liverpool had completed the impossible comeback. Liverpool had done it. They'd come back from 3-0 down. They'd scored 3 goals in 6 minutes. The Ataturk Stadium had never heard noise like it. Liverpool supporters were going absolutely berserk, jumping, screaming, crying, unable to process what they'd just witnessed. On the pitch, Liverpool players celebrated wildly. Xabi Alonso was buried under a pile of red shirts. Steven Gerrard ran around the pitch with his arms spread wide, his face a mask of pure joy and disbelief. In the Milan section, silence, absolute stunned silence. Milan fans couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. Moments ago, they'd been planning celebrations. Now, the game was level. On the Milan bench, Carlo Ancelotti looked like he'd seen a ghost. His team had been 3-0 up, cruising, in complete control. Now, somehow, inexplicably, it was 3-3. He tried to reorganize his team, but the damage was done. Milan were shell-shocked. The television commentators around the world were losing their minds. Clive Tildesley's commentary on ITV became iconic. Liverpool are level. Unbelievable. 3 goals in a magical 6 minutes. Commentators in other countries were equally astonished. In Italy, Spanish, German, and Portuguese, the message was the same. Liverpool had produced the impossible. This wasn't just a comeback. This was sporting history being written in real time. On the pitch, Milan tried to respond. They had the quality, they had the experience. Surely they could regain control, score a 4th goal, break Liverpool's hearts again. But something had changed in the Milan players. The confidence was gone. The swagger had disappeared. They suddenly looked vulnerable, beatable, human. Liverpool, meanwhile, looked invincible. The momentum had swung so dramatically that Milan couldn't cope. 65 minutes. Kaka tried to reassert himself, driving forward with the ball. But Didi Hamann, who'd been brought on at halftime specifically to stop Kaka, made a perfectly timed tackle. The ball was won cleanly. Milan's Brazilian genius had been shackled. Without Kaka's creativity, Milan's attack looked toothless. Crespo and Shevchenko, so deadly in the first half, were now isolated, starved of service. 70 minutes. Liverpool continued to press. They wanted more than just an equalizer. They wanted to win this match. Steven Gerrard drove forward again, but this time Gennaro Gattuso brought him down just outside the penalty area. The referee had no hesitation. Free kick to Liverpool and a yellow card for Gattuso. It was a dangerous position. From here, Liverpool could score a fourth. Xabi Alonso stood over the free kick. He struck it with his left foot, aiming for the top corner. Dida flew across his goal and made another excellent save, tipping the ball over the crossbar. Milan was surviving, but barely. Their defense, so imperious in the first half, was now under siege. The corner was cleared, but Liverpool came again, and again, and again. Wave after wave of red shirts poured forward. 73 minutes. Rafael Benitez made his second substitution. Djibril Cissé, who'd been quiet in the first half, was replaced by Peter Crouch, the tall English striker. Benitez wanted fresh legs, a different presence up front. Milan responded with their own change, bringing on Serginho for Crespo. Ancelotti was trying to regain control to stabilize his rattled team, but Milan looked broken, psychologically shattered by Liverpool's comeback. 80 minutes. Milan had a rare attack. Andriy Shevchenko received the ball in the penalty area with space to shoot. This was the chance to score a fourth, to break Liverpool's hearts. Shevchenko, one of the best strikers in world football, shaped to shoot with his right foot. But somehow, Jerzy Dudek, Liverpool's goalkeeper, blocked it. The ball bounced loose. Shevchenko tried again with his left foot. Dudek blocked it again. 2 saves in seconds from point-blank range. Incredible goalkeeping. Liverpool had survived. 85 minutes. Liverpool won another corner. John Arne Riise swung it into the Milan penalty area. Bodies jostled for position. The ball was headed clear, but only as far as Steven Gerrard on the edge of the box. He struck it first time, but the ball flew over the crossbar. Chance gone. But Liverpool kept coming. They weren't satisfied with a draw. They wanted to win this match in normal time. 90 minutes. The fourth official raised his board. 4 minutes of added time. Both teams were exhausted. Liverpool had expended enormous physical and emotional energy in their comeback. Milan were mentally drained, unable to believe what had happened to them. The final minutes of normal time were frantic, chaotic, end to end. Both teams had chances. Both teams desperately wanted to avoid extra time. But when the referee blew his whistle to end the 90 minutes, the score remained 3-3. Normal time was over. Liverpool had completed one of the most remarkable comebacks in sporting history, but the match wasn't over. 30 minutes of extra time awaited. 2 exhausted teams would have to find the energy to continue. For Liverpool, survival was success. For Milan, anything less than victory would be catastrophic failure. The drama was far from over. Extra time in a Champions League final is a test of physical endurance, mental strength, and pure willpower. Both teams had given everything in the 90 minutes. Now they faced another 30 minutes that could define careers, create legends, or end in heartbreak. As the players prepared for the additional period, exhaustion was written on every face, but neither team could afford to show weakness. This was the Champions League final. This was what they'd worked all season to reach. Tiredness was not an excuse. Rafael Benitez gathered his Liverpool players during the brief break before extra time began. His message was simple: defend solidly, don't concede, be patient. Liverpool had the momentum. They'd achieved the impossible by coming back from 3-0 down. Milan was psychologically damaged. If Liverpool could stay solid defensively, opportunities would come, but they had to be smart, had to be disciplined, had to avoid giving Milan any encouragement. Carlo Ancelotti addressed his Milan players with urgency. They'd let a 3-goal lead slip. They'd been minutes from glory, and Liverpool had snatched it away. But the game wasn't over. Milan still had the quality to win this match. They needed to forget the second half collapse, focus on the extra time ahead, and play with the confidence that had brought them to Istanbul. 1 goal would be enough. Just 1 goal, and the trophy was theirs. The first period of extra time began. Immediately, the pattern was clear. Liverpool defending deep, Milan trying to break them down. But Milan looked uncertain, hesitant. The swagger had gone. Every pass seemed to carry doubt. Every movement lacked conviction. The psychological impact of conceding 3 goals in 6 minutes had fundamentally damaged their confidence. They were going through the motions, but the belief had evaporated. 93 minutes. Kaka received the ball in midfield and tried to drive forward, but Didi Hamann was there, making another crucial interception. The German defensive midfielder, playing with a broken toe, was having the match of his life. Every time Milan threatened, Hamann was in position to break up the attack. His introduction at halftime had been the tactical masterstroke that enabled Liverpool's comeback. Liverpool, when they could summon the energy, tried to counter-attack. Steven Gerrard, showing remarkable stamina despite having covered every blade of grass, drove forward with the ball. He played it wide to John Arne Riise. The Norwegian crossed into the penalty area, but Alessandro Nesta headed clear. Milan's defense, rattled but not broken, was holding firm. They'd made mistakes in those crazy 6 minutes, but they were too experienced, too professional to collapse completely. 97 minutes. Milan won a free kick in a dangerous position, 30 yards from goal. Andrea Pirlo stood over it, the master craftsman who'd orchestrated so much in the first half. He struck the ball with his right foot, aiming for the top corner. But Jerzy Dudek, Liverpool's goalkeeper who'd been badly at fault for the first 2 Milan goals, was perfectly positioned. He watched the ball all the way and caught it cleanly. No danger. Liverpool survived again. 100 minutes. A moment that would enter Liverpool folklore. Andriy Shevchenko, Milan's Ukrainian striker and reigning European Footballer of the Year, found space in the Liverpool penalty area. The ball came to him perfectly. He was 6 yards from goal. Jerzy Dudek was slightly off his line. Shevchenko struck the ball cleanly with his right foot, heading toward the top corner. Goal. It had to be a goal. There was no way Dudek could save it. Except he did. Somehow, impossibly, Dudek threw his body across the goal and got his hand to the ball. The save was incredible, defying physics and probability. The ball bounced away from danger. Shevchenko couldn't believe it. He put his hands to his head, stunned. That chance, at that moment, should have won the match for Milan. Instead, Dudek had made a save that would be replayed forever. Liverpool had survived again. The save energized Liverpool and further demoralized Milan. The Italian side's players looked at each other with growing desperation. What more could they do? They'd been 3 goals ahead. They'd created numerous chances in extra time, but Liverpool refused to die. They kept defending, kept blocking, kept fighting. It was as if fate had decided Liverpool's name would be on the trophy, regardless of logic or probability. 103 minutes. Milan made another change, bringing on Thomasson for Seedorf. Fresh legs, a different option. Ancelotti was throwing everything at Liverpool, trying desperately to find the goal that would break the deadlock. But every Milan attack seemed to run into a wall of red shirts. Jamie Carragher and Sami Hyypiä threw their bodies in front of shots. Didi Hamann intercepted passes. Steven Gerrard tracked back to make tackles in his own penalty area. 105 minutes. The first period of extra time ended. The players had a brief respite before the final 15 minutes. Liverpool's players looked dead on their feet. Some were cramping, others could barely stand, but their spirit remained unbroken. They'd survived the first period. Just 15 more minutes, and they'd take this to penalties. 15 more minutes of suffering, and they'd have a chance to win on spot kicks. Milan's players, by contrast, looked psychologically defeated. They'd run out of ideas. Their quality hadn't disappeared, but their belief had. They were going through the motions, playing because they had to, but the conviction that had characterized their first half performance was completely gone. They looked like a team that knew they'd let victory slip through their fingers and couldn't get it back. The second period of extra time began. 106 minutes. Milan attacked down the right. Cafu crossed into the penalty area. Shevchenko, so deadly throughout his career, met it with a header, but it was straight at Dudek. Another save. Another Milan chance gone. Shevchenko's frustration was evident. He screamed in anguish. This was supposed to be his night. He was supposed to be the hero. Instead, he couldn't buy a goal. 110 minutes. Liverpool won a corner. John Arne Riise swung it into the Milan penalty area. Bodies went up for it. The ball was half cleared. It came to Vladimir Smyka on the edge of the box. He struck it first time, but his shot flew wide. Liverpool was still creating chances, still threatening despite their exhaustion. If they could score a 4th goal, the match would be over. Milan wouldn't recover from that. 113 minutes. Kaká tried one more time to influence the match. The Brazilian, who'd been so brilliant in the first half, picked up the ball in midfield. He drove forward, looking for space, looking for the pass that would unlock Liverpool's defense. But everywhere he turned, there was a red shirt. Didi Hamann, Steven Gerrard, Xabi Alonso, they were all in position, all ready to block his path. Kaká's pass was intercepted. Milan's attack broke down. Liverpool cleared the ball. 116 minutes. A controversial moment. Milan attacked into Liverpool's penalty area. The ball was played towards Shevchenko. Steven Gerrard, tracking back, challenged for the ball. Shevchenko went down. Milan's players screamed for a penalty. Referee Manuel Majuto Gonzalez was unmoved. No penalty. Replays suggested there might have been contact, but the referee had made his decision. Milan's players protested, but it made no difference. Play continued. 118 minutes. Liverpool made their final substitution. Milan Barros, who'd started up front but had been largely ineffective, was replaced by Jimmy Traore, moving forward, and defensive reorganization at the back. Benitez was going ultra-defensive now. Just survive. Just make it to penalties. Don't concede. The trophy was within reach. Just hold on. 120 minutes. The 4th official raised his board. 1 minute of added time in extra time. Both teams were beyond exhaustion. Players were bent over, hands on knees, gasping for air. The heat of the Istanbul night was oppressive. Both teams had given everything. Just 60 more seconds, and this match would be decided on penalties. Milan tried one last desperate attack. The ball was played forward. Liverpool's defense held firm. Jamie Carragher headed clear. The ball was played back to Jerzy Dudek. The goalkeeper took his time, wasting precious seconds. Milan's players tried to press him, but they didn't have the energy. Dudek kicked the ball long. It sailed out of play, and then finally the referee blew his whistle. Extra time was over. The match would be decided on penalties. Liverpool's players collapsed to the ground, exhausted but still in the match. They'd survived. Against all odds, against Milan's quality quality, against their own fatigue, they'd survived. Now it would come down to penalties. 5 kicks each, possibly more. A lottery, a test of nerve. The cruelest way to decide a Champions League final, but also the most dramatic. Everything they'd worked for all season would come down to who could keep their composure from 12 yards. Milan's players walked slowly toward the center circle, their heads down. They knew they should have won this match. 3-0 up, numerous chances in extra time, but Liverpool had refused to die. Now Milan faced penalties where anything could happen, where luck mattered as much as skill. For a team that had dominated the first half so completely, this was the cruelest of outcomes. But they had no choice. Penalties would decide who would lift the Champions League trophy. Penalty shootouts are football's most intense psychological battle. From 12 yards, with only the goalkeeper to beat, world-class players should score every time. But they don't. The pressure is too immense. The consequence of failure too devastating. One moment of hesitation, one slight error in technique, one goalkeeper guess correctly, and dreams are shattered. This is why penalty shootouts are simultaneously beloved and hated by football fans. They're dramatic beyond measure, but they're also cruel, reducing matches of skill and tactics to a game of nerves. As both teams gathered in the center circle to determine the penalty-taking order, the tension was unbearable. Referee Manuel Mejuto Gonzalez conducted the coin toss to determine which end would be used for the shootout. Liverpool won the toss and chose the end where their supporters were massed. 40,000 Liverpool fans would be directly behind the goal, providing support for their players and attempting to intimidate Milan's penalty takers. Every detail mattered now. The Liverpool coaching staff and players discussed who would take the penalties. Steven Gerrard, the captain, would obviously take one. Dietmar Hamann, despite his broken toe, volunteered. Djibril Cissé, Xabi Alonso, and Vladimir Smicer completed the list of 5. Some might question these choices. Where was Jamie Carragher? Where was John Arne Riise? But in the moment, Benitez and Gerrard made their decisions based on who felt confident, who'd taken penalties before, who had the mental strength to handle the pressure. For Milan, the choices were more straightforward. Serginho, Andrea Pirlo, Jon Dahl Tomasson, Andriy Shevchenko, and Alessandro Nesta were designated as the penalty takers. All experienced internationals, all players who'd been in high-pressure situations before, but none of them had experienced a match quite like this. The psychological trauma of conceding 3 goals in 6 minutes still lingered. Could they refocus? Could they deliver when it mattered most? One moment before the penalties began has become part of football folklore. Jerzy Dudek, Liverpool's goalkeeper, walked over to Jamie Carragher for advice on how to approach the shootout. Carragher, Liverpool's defensive leader and a student of the game, gave Dudek a crucial piece of information. He reminded Dudek of the 2004 European Championship final, when Czech goalkeeper Petr Cech had saved penalties by moving around on his line, distracting the penalty takers, making himself seem bigger and more unpredictable. Dudek absorbed this advice and decided to employ similar tactics. He would move around on his goal line, wave his arms, try to distract Milan's penalty takers. Technically, goalkeepers must keep at least 1 foot on the goal line until the ball is struck, but many referees are lenient on this rule, especially in the chaos of a penalty shootout. Dudek decided to test the limits. His performance in the upcoming penalties would become legendary. The penalty shootout was ready to begin. 69,000 people in the stadium held their breath. Hundreds of millions watching on television around the world leaned closer to their screens. This was it. This was the moment that would decide the 2005 Champions League final. History waited. Milan would shoot first. Serginho, the Brazilian left-back, stepped up to take Milan's first penalty. Behind the goal, 40,000 Liverpool supporters created a wall of noise, whistling, shouting, trying to put him off. Jerzy Dudek stood on his goal line, bouncing around, waving his arms, making himself as big and as distracting as possible. Serginho placed the ball on the penalty spot, stepped back, and began his run-up. Serginho struck the ball with his right foot, but there was no conviction in the kick. He was trying to place it rather than power it. The ball flew toward the crossbar. It struck the woodwork and bounced over for a goal kick. Missed. Milan had missed their first penalty. The Liverpool supporters erupted in celebration. Serginho turned away, his head down, devastated. On the Milan bench, Carlo Ancelotti couldn't believe it. This was the worst possible start. Liverpool's first penalty taker was Dietmar Hamann. The German midfielder, who'd been so crucial after his halftime introduction, walked confidently to the penalty spot. He was playing with a broken toe, but he showed no sign of discomfort. He placed the ball, stepped back, and struck it low to Dida's right. The Brazilian goalkeeper dived the correct way, but couldn't reach it. Goal. Liverpool led 1-0 in the shootout. Milan's second penalty taker was Andrea Pirlo. The Italian playmaker who'd orchestrated so much of Milan's first half dominance was the man to restore parity. Jerzy Dudek employed his tactics again, bouncing around, waving his arms. Pirlo's run-up was confident. He struck the ball low, aiming for the bottom corner. But Dudek had guessed correctly. He dived to his right and saved it. Another Milan penalty saved. The Liverpool supporters went berserk. Dudek punched the air in celebration. Liverpool still led 1-0. Djibril Cissé was Liverpool's second penalty taker. The French striker walked confidently to the spot. He struck the ball powerfully, high to Dida's left. The goalkeeper dived the right way, but couldn't reach it. Goal. Liverpool led 2-0 in the shootout. The Liverpool supporters could hardly believe what they were witnessing. Their team, written off as 3-0 down in the first half, was now potentially 3 penalties away from winning the Champions League. Jon Dahl Tomasson was Milan's third penalty taker. The Danish striker had been brought on as a substitute in extra time specifically for this scenario. He placed the ball carefully, began his run-up, and struck it powerfully to Dudek's left. Goal. Milan finally had a penalty on the board. The score was 2-1 to Liverpool. Milan was still in this, but they couldn't afford any more mistakes. John Arne Riise was Liverpool's third penalty taker. The Norwegian fullback, who'd provided the assist for Gerrard's goal in the comeback, approached the penalty spot. Dida, Milan's goalkeeper, tried his own psychological warfare, taking his time, moving around, trying to disturb Riise's concentration. Riise struck the ball, but Dida guessed correctly and saved it. The score remained 2-1 to Liverpool. Milan had been given a lifeline. Kaká was Milan's fourth penalty taker. The Brazilian superstar, who'd been so brilliant in the first half before being shackled in the second, stepped up. He struck his penalty confidently, finding the back of the net. Goal. The score was now 2-2. Everything was level again. The pressure was mounting on both teams. Vladimir Smicer was Liverpool's fourth penalty taker. The Czech midfielder, who'd scored Liverpool's second goal in that remarkable 6-minute spell, could restore Liverpool's advantage. He placed the ball on the spot and struck it with confidence. The ball flew into the net. Goal. Liverpool led 3-2. The advantage was back with the Reds. Andriy Shevchenko, Milan's greatest player, their talisman, the reigning European Footballer of the Year, stepped up for Milan's fifth penalty. This was the moment. If he scored, the shootout would continue. If he missed, Liverpool would win the Champions League. The pressure was unbearable. Jerzy Dudek stood on his goal line, employing his wobbling, distracting tactics one more time. Shevchenko placed the ball on the spot. Jerzy Dudek stood on his goal line, bouncing around like a man possessed. He was using every psychological trick, every distraction technique. The Liverpool supporters behind the goal created a wall of noise. Shevchenko began his run-up. He struck the ball low, aiming for the bottom right corner. Dudek dived to his right. The ball was heading for the corner, but Dudek, with his outstretched left hand, got his fingers to it. The ball was pushed onto the post and bounced away. Saved. Dudek had saved it. Liverpool had won. The Ataturk Stadium erupted. Liverpool players sprinted onto the pitch, mobbing Jerzy Dudek. The goalkeeper, who'd been at fault for Milan's first 2 goals, who'd nearly cost his team the match, had become the hero. His saves from Pirlo and Shevchenko had won Liverpool the Champions League. Steven Gerrard fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face. Jamie Carragher ran around the pitch, screaming in celebration. Rafael Benitez, usually so composed, allowed himself a moment of pure joy. For Milan, the despair was total. Players collapsed to the ground, unable to process what had happened. 3-0 up, completely dominant, now defeated on penalties. Paolo Maldini sat on the pitch, his head in his hands. At 40 years old, he'd just experienced the most painful defeat of his career. Andriy Shevchenko, the penalty taker whose shot had been saved, looked completely broken. Carlo Ancelotti stood on the touchline, staring blankly, unable to comprehend how his team had thrown away such a commanding lead. Liverpool supporters invaded the pitch, overwhelming security. They wanted to celebrate with their heroes. They wanted to be part of this moment. The miracle of Istanbul was complete. Liverpool had come back from 3-0, down to draw 3-3, and then win on penalties. They'd done the impossible. They'd created sporting history. This wasn't just a victory. This was the greatest comeback in football history. This was a story that would be told and retold for generations. When Jerzy Dudek saved Andriy Shevchenko's penalty, time seemed to stop for a moment before exploding into absolute chaos. Liverpool players ran from all directions toward their goalkeeper. The substitutes and coaching staff poured onto the pitch from the bench. Rafael Benitez, usually reserved and analytical, was sprinting toward his players, arms outstretched, face transformed by pure joy. This was vindication, triumph, and disbelief all rolled into one overwhelming moment. Steven Gerrard, Liverpool's captain and the man who'd scored the crucial first goal of the comeback, was in tears. He fell to his knees on the pitch, overcome by emotion. This was the boy who'd grown up in Liverpool, who'd supported the club since childhood, who'd risen through the youth academy to captain the team in a Champions League final. He'd scored in the final. He'd led his team back from the dead. He'd completed the most remarkable comeback in football history. The emotion was too much to contain. Jamie Carragher, Liverpool's vice-captain and defensive warrior, ran around the pitch like a man possessed. He'd thrown his body in front of countless shots during the second half and extra time. He'd defended as if his life depended on it. Now, his team were champions of Europe. He screamed, he jumped, he celebrated with every fiber of his being. This was what football meant. This was why they'd suffered through the dark moments of the season. This was immortality. Jerzy Dudek, the hero of the penalty shootout, was buried under a pile of teammates. The Polish goalkeeper had been criticized earlier in the season for errors that had cost Liverpool points in the Premier League. He'd been at fault for Milan's first 2 goals in this very match, but he'd redeemed himself in the most spectacular fashion possible. His double save from Shevchenko in extra time, and then his penalty shootout heroics, had won Liverpool the trophy. He'd gone from villain to hero in the space of 1 match. The Liverpool supporters who'd invaded the pitch were eventually ushered back to their section, but their celebrations continued unabated. "You'll never walk alone" rang out again, but this time it was a victory song, a celebration anthem, a tribute to belief and loyalty. These fans had witnessed something they'd never forget. They'd seen their team dead and buried at halftime. They'd seen the impossible comeback. They'd seen history made. They'd been there. They could tell their grandchildren about this night. For AC Milan, the immediate aftermath was devastating. Players lay on the pitch, unable or unwilling to move. Some were crying, others stared into space, their minds unable to process what had happened. Paolo Maldini, the veteran captain playing in his 8th European Cup final, sat alone on the turf, his head bowed. He'd been 3-0 up. He'd scored the opening goal after 52 seconds. He'd been 45 minutes away from his 6th European Cup. Now he had to collect a loser's medal. Andriy Shevchenko, whose penalty had been saved by Dudek, was inconsolable. Teammates tried to comfort him, but he was beyond consolation. He'd been the reigning European Footballer of the Year. He'd been Milan's talisman. He'd been expected to deliver in this final. Instead, he'd been denied repeatedly by Dudek, and his missed penalty had handed the trophy to Liverpool. The psychological burden was enormous. Carlo Ancelotti, Milan's manager, walked onto the pitch to console his players. He tried to find words of comfort, but what could he say? His team had been perfect for 45 minutes. They'd been 3 goals ahead, then everything had collapsed in 6 minutes of madness. Ancelotti had tried everything in extra time to find a winner, but Liverpool's defense had held firm. Now, on penalties, luck had favored Liverpool. There was no tactical explanation, no analytical breakdown that could make this defeat easier to accept. The medal ceremony was torture for Milan's players. They had to stand and watch as Liverpool celebrated. They had to collect their runner-up medals, silver medals that felt like lead weights around their necks. Paolo Maldini, as captain, had to receive his medal from UEFA president Lennart Johansson. The Italian legend showed incredible dignity, accepting his medal and shaking hands with officials, but his pain was evident. This was the worst moment of his career. Then came Liverpool's turn. One by one, the players climbed the steps to the podium to collect their winners' medals. Each player received a gold medal and then moved aside to allow their teammates to follow. The joy on their faces was unbounded. These were men who'd achieved something extraordinary, who'd written themselves into football history. Some kissed their medals, others held them aloft. All of them savored every second. Steven Gerrard, as Liverpool's captain, was the last to receive his medal. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. The Champions League trophy, European football's most prestigious prize, was presented to Gerrard. He lifted it high above his head, and the stadium erupted again. Fireworks exploded. Confetti rained down. "We are the champions" by Queen blasted through the stadium speakers. This was Liverpool's moment. This was their glory. This was the reward for belief, courage, and never giving up. The trophy was passed from player to player. Each one held it, kissed it, celebrated with it. Jerzy Dudek wrapped himself in a Polish flag and posed with the trophy. Jamie Carragher, covered in sweat and with his face streaked with tears, held the trophy aloft and screamed in triumph. Rafael Benitez, usually so serious, allowed himself to smile broadly as he held the trophy that vindicated his tactical decisions and his belief in his team. The Liverpool supporters stayed in the stadium long after the final whistle, unwilling to leave, wanting to prolong the moment. They sang song after song, celebrating their heroes, reliving the comeback, unable to quite believe what they'd witnessed. This was a night that would define their lives as football supporters. They'd been there. They'd seen the miracle. They'd witnessed Istanbul. Back in Liverpool, the city had watched the match on television, in pubs, in homes, in public screenings. When Dudek saved Shevchenko's penalty, the entire city erupted. People poured into the streets, celebrating, hugging strangers, crying tears of joy. Liverpool had won the European Cup for the 5th time. The famous anthem, Allez, 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 would be created years later. But on this night, the traditional Liverpool songs rang out across the city. This was a moment of pure, collective joy. The global reaction was equally remarkable. Football fans around the world, regardless of their allegiances, recognized they'd witnessed something special. Neutral observers called it the greatest match they'd ever seen. Media outlets worldwide led with the story. The miracle of Istanbul became the universal description. Even those who'd predicted Milan would win easily had to acknowledge Liverpool's achievement. This wasn't just a victory, this was sporting mythology being created in real time. In the early hours of the morning, as the celebrations continued in Istanbul and Liverpool, reality began to sink in for both sets of players. For Liverpool, this was a triumph that transcended football. They'd proved that belief matters, that courage can overcome superior quality, that miracles can happen. For Milan, this was a wound that would take years to heal. They'd experienced the most painful defeat imaginable. Both teams' lives had been changed forever by 90 minutes of football and a penalty shootout. 20 years have passed since that extraordinary night in Istanbul, and the 2005 Champions League final remains the most discussed, analyzed, and celebrated match in football history. Its impact extended far beyond the immediate result, shaping careers, influencing tactics, and entering popular culture in ways that few sporting events ever achieve. To understand the true significance of Istanbul, we must examine how it changed football and the lives of those involved. For Liverpool Football Club, victory in Istanbul provided validation and renewed purpose. They'd been a sleeping giant, living on past glories, unable to compete with the financial might of Chelsea and the emerging dominance of Manchester United. The fifth European Cup proved Liverpool still belonged among Europe's elite. More importantly, it established a template for success built on spirit, determination, and tactical intelligence rather than pure financial power. Rafael Benitez's ability to win the biggest prize with limited resources earned him legendary status at Anfield. The immediate aftermath brought complications. Because Liverpool finished fifth in the Premier League, they didn't qualify for the following season's Champions League through their league position. This created a controversy. Should the defending champions be allowed to defend their trophy, even if they hadn't qualified through normal channels? UEFA ultimately decided to allow Liverpool to enter the competition in the first qualifying round, setting a precedent for future defending champions. This decision demonstrated the special status Istanbul had conferred upon Liverpool. Steven Gerrard's performance in Istanbul elevated him from excellent player to Liverpool legend. His goal that started the comeback, his tireless running in midfield, his leadership in the face of seemingly inevitable defeat, all combined to create an image of Gerrard as the ultimate warrior captain. He would go on to spend his entire career at Liverpool, rejecting overtures from Chelsea and other clubs, partly because Istanbul had created a bond between him and the club that couldn't be broken. He became Mr. Liverpool, and Istanbul was the defining moment of that identity. Jamie Carragher's legacy was similarly enhanced. The local defender who'd spent his entire career at Liverpool became synonymous with determination and loyalty. His defensive performance in the second half and extra time, throwing his body in front of shot after shot, epitomized what Liverpool meant. Like Gerrard, Carragher would spend his entire career at the club, becoming a one-club man in an era when such devotion was increasingly rare. Istanbul made that commitment meaningful and heroic. Jerzy Dudek's career trajectory was completely altered by Istanbul. He'd been a steady but unspectacular goalkeeper, prone to occasional errors. After Istanbul, he was forever the man who'd saved Shevchenko's penalties, who'd employed psychological warfare to unsettle Milan's penalty takers, who'd won Liverpool the European Cup. When he eventually left Liverpool in 2007, he did so as a club legend, guaranteed immortality, regardless of what came after. Rafael Benitez's reputation was established globally by Istanbul. He'd already won La Liga titles with Valencia, but Istanbul proved he could succeed on the biggest stage with a team that wasn't the favorite. His tactical acumen, particularly the halftime changes that enabled Liverpool's comeback, became a case study in football coaching courses. He would go on to manage Real Madrid, Chelsea, and Napoli, among others, always introduced as the man who masterminded the miracle of Istanbul. For AC Milan, the immediate aftermath was traumatic. They'd experienced the most painful defeat imaginable. A 3-goal lead squandered, chances missed, penalties saved. The psychological damage was immense. Carlo Ancelotti had to rebuild his team's confidence and belief. Some players struggled to recover mentally from the experience. The defeat haunted them. Paolo Maldini, at 40 years old, had to come to terms with losing what would likely be his final Champions League final. He'd scored the fastest goal in final history and been 3-0 up, only to end up a loser. For a player of his stature and professionalism, this was perhaps the cruelest possible end to his European career. He would continue playing until 2009, but Istanbul remained an unhealed wound. In later interviews, Maldini has spoken about how the defeat still hurts, how he can't watch replays, how it remains his biggest career regret. Andriy Shevchenko's career was significantly impacted by Istanbul. The missed penalties and the numerous chances saved by Dudek weighed heavily on him. He would move to Chelsea the following summer in a big-money transfer, but he never recaptured his best form. Some suggested the psychological burden of Istanbul affected his confidence. He would eventually return to AC Milan, but he was never quite the same player. Istanbul had taken something from him. AC Milan would get their revenge 2 years later. In the 2007 Champions League final, Milan faced Liverpool again, this time in Athens. Milan won 2-1 in a much more controlled performance. For many Milan players, that victory provided closure for Istanbul. Paolo Maldini finally won his 6th European Cup. Carlo Ancelotti exercised his demons. Andrea Pirlo got his winner's medal. The 2007 final is often described as Milan's revenge match, testament to how deeply Istanbul had wounded them. The tactical lessons from Istanbul have been studied extensively. Benitez's halftime changes, particularly introducing Didi Hamann to shield the defense, and pushing Gerrard higher up the pitch are now taught in coaching courses as examples of effective in-game management. The ability to recognize what's wrong and fix it quickly, even in the most pressured circumstances, became a defining characteristic of top-level management. Benitez's willingness to make bold changes set a precedent. The psychological aspects of Istanbul have fascinated sports psychologists. How did Liverpool overcome a 3-0 deficit when all logic suggested it was impossible? The answer lies in breaking the task into manageable chunks. Benitez's instruction to focus on 15-minute segments rather than the full 90 minutes was crucial. Score one goal, then worry about the next. Don't think about winning the match. Think about the next challenge. This approach has been adopted by teams in all sports when facing seemingly insurmountable deficits. The role of the supporters in Istanbul cannot be overstated. The Liverpool fans who stayed in the stadium at halftime, who continued singing when their team was 3-0 down, who created an atmosphere that inspired the comeback, became part of the legend. Their loyalty and belief were rewarded. This reinforced the idea that supporters are more than just spectators. They're participants in the drama. The power of "You'll Never Walk Alone" as an anthem was never more evident than in Istanbul. For football fans globally, Istanbul became the ultimate example of why sport matters. It wasn't the richest team or the most talented team that won. It was the team that refused to give up, that believed when belief seemed foolish, that found strength when exhausted. Istanbul proved that sport can produce narratives that rival fiction in their drama and emotional impact. It reminded everyone why they love football, because sometimes, just sometimes, the impossible happens. The media coverage of Istanbul was unprecedented. The match was replayed endlessly on television. Documentaries were produced. Books were written. The phrase, "the miracle of Istanbul," entered the football lexicon immediately. Even people who hadn't watched the match live became familiar with the story. Istanbul transcended the immediate moment to become part of cultural knowledge, something everyone who cares about football must know. The financial impact on Liverpool was significant. Victory in Istanbul brought prize money, but more importantly, it enhanced the club's global brand. Liverpool shirt sales increased dramatically worldwide. The club could attract better players and command higher commercial deals. Istanbul proved that success on the pitch translates directly to commercial success off it. The fifth European Cup became a powerful marketing tool. UEFA recognized Istanbul as one of the greatest finals in Champions League history. When compiling lists of best matches, most memorable moments, or greatest comebacks, Istanbul invariably tops the rankings. UEFA uses footage from the match in promotional materials, recognizing that Istanbul encapsulates everything the Champions League represents: drama, quality, emotion, and unpredictability. Individual awards and recognition followed for Liverpool's players. Steven Gerrard was named UEFA Club Footballer of the Year. He would later win the PFA Players Player of the Year award. Rafael Benitez won various Manager of the Year awards. The team was collectively recognized for their achievement. These honors reinforced the historical significance of what they'd accomplished. For young players watching Istanbul, the match provided inspiration and a template for their own careers. Many professional footballers who were children or teenagers in 2005 have cited Istanbul as the match that made them love football, that showed them what the sport could produce at its best. The generational impact of one 90-minute match has been profound. The tactical evolution of football in the following years bore traces of Istanbul's influence. Teams became more willing to take risks when behind, recognizing that even large deficits could be overcome with the right approach. The importance of momentum in matches was reinforced. Coaches became more willing to make bold halftime substitutions and tactical changes, learning from Benitez's example. The phrase, "don't let your dreams be dreams" or "never give up" became associated with Istanbul. Motivational speakers in all fields, not just sport, used Istanbul as an example of overcoming adversity. The match transcended football to become a broader cultural reference point for resilience and belief. When people face seemingly impossible situations, someone invariably mentions Istanbul as proof that comebacks are possible. AC Milan's recovery from Istanbul took years but eventually happened. They won the Champions League in 2007, as mentioned, but also had to rebuild their squad as the great team of the early 2000s aged. Players like Maldini, Nesta, and Pirlo eventually retired or moved on. New stars emerged, but Istanbul remained a defining moment in the club's history, a cautionary tale about complacency and the importance of maintaining focus. Liverpool's subsequent years brought mixed fortunes. They reached the Champions League final again in 2007, losing to Milan in the revenge match. Rafael Benitez came close to winning the Premier League in 2009, but fell short. He left the club in 2010, but Istanbul remained the high point, the achievement that nothing could diminish. Liverpool fans from the Istanbul generation will forever treasure that night above all others. The economic analysis of Istanbul revealed fascinating insights. Ticket prices for the match had been relatively modest by modern standards, yet the global television audience was enormous. The value generated for UEFA, for both clubs, and for Turkish tourism was calculated in hundreds of millions of pounds. Istanbul demonstrated that major sporting events are economic engines, generating wealth and exposure that extends far beyond the gate receipts. Football writers and historians have placed Istanbul in context alongside other great sporting comebacks. Muhammad Ali defeating George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle, Roger Federer saving match points against Novak Djokovic at Wimbledon, various Olympic moments where underdogs triumphed. Istanbul holds its own in any such discussion, recognized as one of the greatest sporting comebacks regardless of sport. The human stories from Istanbul continue to emerge decades later. Fans who proposed to their partners after the match, people who made lifelong friendships in the stadium that night, children who were inspired to become footballers, players whose lives were changed forever. These individual narratives collectively form the rich tapestry of Istanbul's legacy. Rafael Benitez has spoken often about Istanbul in the years since. He's explained his tactical thinking, his halftime team talk, his belief that the match could still be salvaged even at 3-0 down. His analytical approach to what others saw as impossible has provided valuable lessons for coaches and players at all levels. Benitez's reputation was built partly on other achievements, but Istanbul remains his calling card. Steven Gerrard's autobiography devotes an entire chapter to Istanbul. He describes the emotions of that night, the despair at halftime, the growing belief in the second half, the exhaustion of extra time, the terror of penalties. Reading his account provides insight into what the players experienced internally during those dramatic hours. It's a testament to the enduring power of Istanbul that these stories remain compelling decades later. The 20-year anniversary of Istanbul in 2025 brought renewed focus on the match. Reunion events were organized. Documentary crews produced new films with fresh interviews. The surviving participants gathered to reminisce and reflect on how that night changed their lives. The anniversary provided an opportunity to reassess Istanbul's place in football history. The consensus: it remains the greatest club football match ever played. For Liverpool supporters, Istanbul is more than just a match. It's a story about their club's values: loyalty, courage, never giving up. You'll Never Walk Alone isn't just a song. It's a philosophy embodied by what happened in Istanbul. When things look darkest, you keep believing. When defeat seems certain, you keep fighting. When logic says it's over, you find a way. Istanbul taught these lessons, and Liverpool supporters carry them forward. The miracle of Istanbul will continue to be told as long as football is played. New generations will discover the story, watch the highlights, marvel at the impossible comeback. It's become a permanent part of football mythology, a story that will be passed down through generations. And that, ultimately, is Istanbul's greatest legacy. It proved that in football, as in life, miracles can happen. You just have to believe. 2 decades after Istanbul, the principal figures from that extraordinary night have gone on to varied and fascinating careers. Their paths diverged, but all remain connected by that shared moment of sporting history. Understanding where they are now provides perspective on how one night can shape an entire life. Steven Gerrard remained at Liverpool until 2014, becoming the club's greatest modern player. He captained the team for over a decade, nearly winning the Premier League in 2014 before a famous slip against Chelsea cost Liverpool the title. He retired after a season with LA Galaxy in the United States and then entered management. He managed Rangers in Scotland with success, winning the league title before taking over at Aston Villa and later Saudi Arabian club Al Ettifaq. His coaching career continues, though he hasn't yet matched his playing success. He remains a Liverpool legend, forever defined by Istanbul. Jamie Carragher also remained at Liverpool for his entire career, retiring in 2013 as a one-club man. He transitioned seamlessly into television punditry, becoming one of the most respected analysts in British football. His partnership with former Manchester United player Gary Neville on Sky Sports has been hugely successful, combining tactical insight with humour and passion. Carragher also runs a football academy in Liverpool and engages in extensive charity work. Istanbul made him a Liverpool legend, but his post-playing career has been equally successful. Jerzy Dudek left Liverpool in 2007 to join Real Madrid as a backup goalkeeper. He spent 4 years in Spain, rarely playing but winning La Liga and collecting another Champions League medal. He retired in 2011 and has since worked as a goalkeeping coach and pundit in Poland. He wrote an autobiography focusing heavily on Istanbul, recognizing that those penalty saves defined his career. He remains a Liverpool legend, forever the hero of Istanbul. Xabi Alonso left Liverpool in 2009 to join Real Madrid, where he won the Champions League, La Liga, and Copa del Rey. He later moved to Bayern Munich, winning 3 Bundesliga titles. He retired in 2017 and quickly moved into management. His coaching career has been remarkably successful, winning titles with Bayer Leverkusen and establishing himself as one of Europe's brightest young managers. Istanbul was just one highlight in a career full of achievements, but it remains special to him. Rafael Benitez left Liverpool in 2010 after a deteriorating relationship with the club's owners. He went on to manage Inter Milan, Chelsea, Napoli, Real Madrid, Newcastle United, and Everton, among others. His career has been defined by tactical excellence, but also controversy and difficult relationships with boards. He remains highly respected in coaching circles, and Istanbul is always mentioned as his greatest achievement. He's currently managing in the Saudi Pro League, still applying the analytical approach that brought him success. For AC Milan's players, the journey after Istanbul was equally complex. Paolo Maldini retired in 2009 at the age of 41, having won one more Champions League in 2007. He's widely regarded as one of the greatest defenders in football history. He later worked in Milan's management structure, becoming technical director before stepping down in 2023. Istanbul remains a painful memory, but his overall legacy is untouchable. Andriy Shevchenko moved to Chelsea in 2006 but struggled badly, never recapturing his Milan form. He returned to AC Milan briefly before finishing his career at Dynamo Kiev in Ukraine. He then managed the Ukrainian national team with mixed results before stepping down. His post-playing career has also involved political work in Ukraine. Istanbul's penalties continue to haunt him, but he remains a Ukrainian sporting hero. Andrea Pirlo left Milan for Juventus in 2011, winning 4 Serie A titles and reaching another Champions League final. He retired in 2015 after a spell with New York City FC and moved into management. His playing career was magnificent, full of achievements, but Istanbul remains a blot on an otherwise perfect record. He's considered one of the greatest midfielders ever, and Istanbul is barely mentioned when discussing his legacy. Kaká left Milan for Real Madrid in 2009 in one of football's most expensive transfers. Injuries hampered his time in Spain, and he never quite recaptured his Istanbul-era brilliance. He retired in 2017 after returning to Brazil. He's since worked as a club ambassador and pundit. Istanbul represented his peak as a player, the moment when he was arguably the best footballer on the planet. His subsequent career, while successful, never matched those heights. Carlo Ancelotti has had one of the most successful managerial careers in football history. After leaving Milan in 2009, he managed Chelsea, Paris Saint-Germain, Real Madrid twice, Bayern Munich, and Everton. He's won the Champions League 4 times as a manager, more than anyone else. He's currently in his second spell at Real Madrid, adding to his legend. Istanbul was a painful defeat, but his subsequent success has somewhat overshadowed it. He's proven you can recover from even the most devastating setbacks. Hernan Crespo, who scored both of Milan's second-half goals before the collapse, retired in 2012 after spells at Inter Milan, Genoa, and Parma. He's since worked as a manager in South America and Italy with mixed results. Istanbul was simultaneously his finest hour, 2 beautiful goals, and a source of pain being on the losing side. He speaks philosophically about the match now, recognizing it as football's unpredictability at its most extreme. Gennaro Gattuso retired in 2013 and moved into management. He's managed several Serie A clubs, including AC Milan, Napoli, and most recently Marseille. His playing career was defined by aggression and determination, and his management style reflects those qualities. Istanbul was a rare failure in his Milan career, a night when his usual intensity couldn't prevent disaster. Clarence Seedorf retired in 2014 after a career that saw him win the Champions League with 3 different clubs, Ajax, Real Madrid, and AC Milan twice. He briefly managed AC Milan and other clubs, but is now more focused on punditry and business ventures. Istanbul was one low point in an otherwise stellar career. Didi Hamann, whose halftime introduction changed the match, retired in 2011 after spells at Manchester City and Milton Keynes' Dons. He's worked as a pundit and coach in England and Germany. Istanbul represents his finest moment, the substitute appearance that enabled Liverpool's comeback. He speaks proudly about his role in the miracle. The referee, Manuel Mejuto Gonzalez, continued officiating at the highest level until his retirement in 2012. He handled numerous big matches, but is forever associated with Istanbul. He's spoken about the difficulty of managing such an emotional match and the pride he feels at being part of football history. For the supporters who traveled to Istanbul, the experience remains the highlight of their football supporting lives. Many have made return trips to the Ataturk Stadium, posing for photographs, remembering where they sat, reliving the magic. The Liverpool supporters who were there have a special bond, united by their presence at the miracle. They've formed associations, hold annual reunions, and treasure their memories. The Istanbul story has been adapted into various media formats. Documentaries have been produced by multiple broadcasters. Books have been written from various perspectives. Podcasts have devoted hours to analyzing every aspect of the match. The story never gets old because it contains all the elements of perfect drama: impossible odds overcome, individual heroism, collective effort, psychological warfare, and ultimately triumph against all logic. The match also led to rule changes in UEFA competitions. The issue of whether defending champions should automatically qualify for the following season's Champions League was clarified following Liverpool's situation. UEFA also reviewed its ticketing allocation policies after the chaos that surrounded the final. Istanbul's legacy extends even to administrative matters. Football academies around the world use Istanbul as a teaching tool. Coaches show the match to young players to demonstrate that matches are never over until the final whistle. The psychological lessons about maintaining belief, playing in the moment, and refusing to accept defeat are valuable at all levels of sport. Istanbul has become a case study in sports psychology. The economic impact on Istanbul itself was significant. The city's successful hosting of the final, despite some infrastructure issues, showcased Turkey's ability to host major sporting events. This contributed to Turkey's subsequent bids for other tournaments and enhanced Istanbul's reputation as a sporting destination. The Ataturk Stadium, though later overshadowed by newer venues, remains famous as the venue for the greatest final. For football as a sport, Istanbul reinforced several important truths. First, that financial superiority doesn't guarantee success. Milan had assembled a squad at enormous expense, yet were beaten by a Liverpool team built more modestly. Second, that team spirit and collective effort can overcome individual brilliance. And third, that football's unpredictability is what makes it the world's most popular sport. No other outcome could have been less predictable than what happened in Istanbul. The phrase Istanbul 2005 immediately evokes the comeback for football fans worldwide. It needs no further explanation. It's become a shorthand reference for impossible achievements, for never giving up, for miracles. When teams face large deficits, commentators inevitably reference Istanbul. It's the standard by which all comebacks are measured. Liverpool Football Club has officially recognized Istanbul as the club's greatest modern achievement. A special exhibition at the club museum is dedicated to that night. The players who participated are honored annually. The club's commercial department uses Istanbul imagery extensively in marketing, recognizing its enduring appeal to supporters old and new. The 5 European Cups Liverpool has won in 1977, 1978, 1981, 1984, and 2005 mean the club was awarded the original trophy to keep permanently by UEFA, which had a rule that any club winning the competition 5 times or 3 times consecutively could keep the original trophy. Liverpool's 5th win in Istanbul triggered this rule, and the original European Cup now resides permanently in Liverpool's trophy room. Istanbul literally brought the trophy home forever. In conclusion, 20 years after the miracle of Istanbul, the match has lost none of its power to inspire, amaze, and move people. The principals have moved on with their lives and careers, but they remain forever connected by that extraordinary night. The match continues to be discovered by new generations, ensuring its legend will endure. Istanbul wasn't just a football match. It was a demonstration of human spirit, courage, and the refusal to accept defeat. It was proof that sometimes, just sometimes, believing in the impossible makes it possible. It was, quite simply, the greatest night in Liverpool Football Club's history and the most remarkable match football has ever produced. The miracle of Istanbul will live forever.